All of the life requires energy on Earth. So we are going to talk about the cellular respiration. First, in order to understand cellular respiration, we have to see the whole picture of how energy goes from one area to another. This is a tree that it's a photoautotroph. That means autotroph, it can make its own food, the carbohydrate, in one way, and it's photo because it uses energy from the sun, so the light. In almost all systems, energy ultimately comes from the light. Next to the tree, it's a, what is that? Chloroplast that has the grana, the thylakoid membrane. So the energy is captured by the chlorophyll in the chloroplast and uses the energy as well as the water and carbon dioxide from the air to produce carbohydrate. The byproduct of that reaction is the oxygen. So carbohydrate, we can call it glucose, but later on it will turn into glucose. So this is the process of photosynthesis, and we will go deeper later on in photosynthesis, but from now, let's focus on the cellular respiration. So here is a heterotroph organism. And it takes in the oxygen and the carbohydrate that the photoautotroph organisms produced and will use its mitochondrion to burn the sugar, the carbohydrate, and other organic materials. This is the mitochondrion, the inner membrane with the cristae, and the outer membrane. The inner membrane is inside. Inside of the inner membrane is the matrix, and between the outer and inner membrane is the intermembrane space. So the dog is using the carbohydrate that the plant made through cellular respiration to produce its own energy, the useful energy, the ATP. Besides producing ATP through cellular respiration, the thermal energy is also a byproduct that is not needed, but the effectiveness of the cellular respiration is not 100%. So the energy comes from the light and goes and turns into thermal energy, or as well as ATP, and the energy's way is one-way reaction. On the other hand, the substances, they get recycled. The oxygen, the carbon dioxide, the water, and the carbon molecules in the carbohydrate. Now, there's one misconception about that only heterotrophs are capable of doing cellular respiration. This is not true. Trees are using cellular respiration too. All of the organisms that have mitochondria are using and performing cellular respiration. So let's talk about the redox reaction now. Redox reactions, this is a chemical reaction, and the movement of electrons from one molecule to another is an oxidation reduction reaction, or shortly said, redox reaction. In a redox reaction, here is the glucose and oxygen, and it's going to yield to ATP, thermal energy, carbon dioxide, and water molecule. The sugar molecule is giving losing electrons and gives off its electrons to the water molecule. So the loses electron from one substance, it's called the oxidation. This is basically the burning. Without enzymes, it would be a really hot reaction, and it would even produce light, this reaction. But this reaction in our body, in the mitochondrion, it's controlled with enzymes, so that's why we are not in flames and we are not producing light energy by burning the glucose in our body. Redox reaction. So, as the electron get lost, one material will lose the electron, it also loses a proton, a hydrogen hydrogen ion. So in here, the glucose is losing hydrogen and electrons, protons and electrons, go through oxidation and turns into carbon dioxide. The glucose gets oxidized and turns into carbon dioxide. Now, the oxygen, on the other hand, is going to receive the proton and the electron, what the glucose gave up, and gives it, it turns into water as the oxygen gets reduced and turns into water. The water in this particular chemical reaction is a waste product. Important player in the chemical reaction, and we have to talk about the NAD+, it's gaining electrons and protons and turns into NADH. And as it loses electrons and protons, it's going to get oxidized. So when the NAD+ gains electrons, it's going to get reduced. When it loses electrons and proton, it's going to get oxidized. How is that? This is NAD+ is a electron transporter that carries the electrons from the glucose to the oxygen, and the oxygen will pick it up and turns into water. Where does the oxygen come from? From breathing.